All right, so welcome everybody. My name is Drew, and this is Every Bird Has a Story, hosted by the Environmental Volunteers and presented by Judy Kramer. I want to thank everybody who could join. And just a little bit about us before we get started. We are the Environmental Volunteers. The EV is a national leader in nature science education and have been inspiring a love of science and nature since 1972. We have hundreds of active volunteers who make our programs possible. And if you would like to find out more about who we are and what we do, please visit our website. We are always looking for new volunteers. And it is my pleasure today to welcome Judy Kramer, who will be presenting Every Bird Has a Story for us. Judy is a local award-winning nature photographer living in Palo Alto. She is a past president of the Palo Alto Camera Club and is now a member of Gallery House on California Avenue in Palo Alto. Her work has been published in 3 books and seen in various local venues. Organizations that use her photos include the California Native Plant Society, Peninsula Open Space Trust, North America Nature Photography Association, and the Environmental Volunteers. Now, 2 kind of housekeeping things before we get started. Number 1, this program is going to be recorded, just a heads up to everybody. However, we will have a question and answer period at the end, and we will not record the entire question and answer period. So if you do have some questions but don't want to be part of the recording, feel free to ask them after it has stopped. And then as for questions, like I said, we will leave the chat open. You're welcome to put questions in the chat. We will be answering all the questions at the end. So go ahead and just use the chat, or you can wait till the end to ask them. And yeah. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Judy. Thank you so much for presenting for us, and enjoy the program.
Thank you very much. It's really nice to have the EVs sponsor this. I'm going to share. So I see a lot of names I know, and then I see a lot of people I don't know. So welcome. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll still be able to see you. But when I start the program, it takes up the whole screen, and I can't see you. So that's one of the reasons we're not doing questions to the end, because I can't see you. So I'm going to share my screen. So you should be seeing a little acorn woodpecker. And I'm going to, I have to move this, right? And I'm going to open up my, open up the program. So you should be seeing Every Bird Has a Story, with a Forster's tern flying at us with a little fish in his or her beak. So I would just say I started serious bird photography during the pandemic, because I do a lot of wildflower photography, but when the wildflowers dry up in June, for the most part, it's like, oh, well, I can't travel. So what am I going to do? So my husband and I started going out near the bay, and there are of course a lot of birds, and I discovered I really enjoyed birds and do feel that every bird has a story. I'm going to go over a little bit about resources. I'm going to tell you 12 different bird stories. And then at the end, I'm going to do a little 5-minute slideshow of some of my other photos. So people often ask me where I go. We are so fortunate. We have a lot of open space, particularly around the bay. But all over we have a lot of open space. And I've been as far north as San Mateo and Hayward, as far south as Morgan Hill, as far west as Almaden Lake and Guadalupe Oaks, and as far east as Ed Levin County Park and Milpitas. So there are places both around the bay and in the woods where you can find birds. And this is just the local map of Palo Alto, near in the Palo Alto area, because of course, living in Palo Alto, it's the easiest place for me to get to. But you can actually walk along the bay from east of Shoreline Lake on the right side of the map, all the way to the San Francisco Creek and San Mateo County line. So there are so many places. And these are some of my places, and a lot of my bird photos are from this area. Why isn't it moving? So I just say a little bit, there are a lot of organizations and a lot of websites that you can go on that are local that tell you where people are finding birds. Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society has on its website self-guided walks, and they tell you what birds might be there at this time of year, how to get there, how to walk on the trail. So they're really wonderful. In San Mateo County, there's also an Audubon Society, Sequoia Audubon Society. And then nationally, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is kind of a resource for all things having to do with birds. I like books, being the age I am. I like physical books. I use the Stokes Field Guide for Birds as kind of my go-to book. But when you're out in the field, there are wonderful apps that you can have on your phone, iBird Plus and Audubon. And Merlin, I'm told you can actually hold up your phone, have it record the bird, send it to Merlin, and Merlin will tell you what bird it might be. So there's really a lot you can do to help you identify birds. I don't know why it's not doing that. So my philosophy is that even when birds are sitting, they're telling a story, but of course they also move and do interesting things. So around grooming, hunting and eating, courting, caring for the young, their physical characteristics, like their beaks, I'm going to talk about. And then I just think birds can be very funny. It's a projection, of course. They're not being funny on purpose, but there's a lot of humor to be found in bird photography. So my first story has to do with dabblers and divers. So there are basically two kinds of ducks, depending on how they feed. So this is a northern shoveler. You can see that wonderful shovel beak that's really quite large. And they stick their heads in the water and they troll through the water to get their food, but they don't put their head under the water and they don't dive. They don't go under the water. So that's called a dabbler. Another dabbler, very common, are the mallards. They go bottoms up and they get their greens that way. But they don't dive under the water. So those are some of the many ducks are different kinds of ducks are dabblers. But there are birds that dive from the water. So I'm not talking about diving from the sky, but they're sitting on the water and they dive. This is a male and a female bufflehead. There are ruddy ducks dive. All the grebes dive. And you'll be watching them and you'll say to your friend, oh, look at that bird there. And your friend looks and it's like, what bird? Because they go under the water and they're really quite graceful. And it's interesting. They have to get enough momentum. If you dive from the sky, you're just, gravity is taking you down. But if you're just sitting on the water, it takes a little more effort. So I took a series of photos of this female bufflehead diving, wasn't always the same bird, and put them together in a composite through the magic of Photoshop. And so you can see the bird sitting on the water, and then it pushes down with its feet to get a little motion going and makes a little circle, basically, and then gets enough momentum so it can go under the water and then pushes down with its feet. And there in that last picture on the right side, you can see they're under the water. Birds can swim quite a ways under the water. So sometimes they go under and you're trying to see where it comes up and you may have to look a distance. So those are the divers. So dabblers and divers. The next story is the beak story. So birds have various size and shape beaks depending on what they eat and where they eat it. So this is a picture of three different birds. The two straight beaks, the marbled godwit on the left, and that smaller bird, the long-billed dowitcher. And The dowitchers are sometimes called sewing machine birds because when they feed, they put the beak straight down into the water and go up and down. So it looks like the bobbin on a sewing machine. And then you have the long-billed curlews with the very distinctive beak that curves down. And then you have American avocets where the beak curves up. So this is in breeding plumage. So some of the year, all that brown would be gone and it would just be white, pretty much all white. But they're very attractive, of course, in breeding plumage. That's the point. And very distinctive with that beak curving up. It can also be the color of the beak that makes the difference when you're trying to identify them. So the two egrets, the great egret has a yellow beak and black feet, and it's kind of tall. It's a big bird. Or the snowy egret, which has the reverse. It has a black beak and yellow feet. So it's pretty distinctive to be able to tell the difference. The snowy egret is also smaller and fluffier. The wings blow more easily, and so, and as I said, it's smaller, so you can tell, particularly if you see them in the same area, you can tell which one is which. But the beak and the feet are determinative. This bird, this white-crowned sparrow, very common bird in the wintertime, they're all up north now, has a thick beak because it's a seed eater. So it needs a stronger beak to break open the shells of the seeds. You see them around under your bird feeder and out in the, away from bird feeders too. But it's a seed eater as opposed to the black phoebe, which is an insect eater. So it has that longer, a thinner beak because it has to move its beak quickly to catch the insects. And black phoebes, you see them, they're very common. You see them on posts on top of this little building, and they fly off and then they fly back. So they fly off, gobble up an insect, and then fly back and look around looking for the next insect. So that's a very common behavior of insect feeders. And then I couldn't resist, I have to include a hummingbird, of course, has that long thin beak to get into often into tube flowers. And it would be great if I had a picture with the tongue out, but I don't. So this is a very common hummingbird in our area, Anna's hummingbird. You'll see in the slideshow, they have often have red on the throat, and it doesn't always show. And then they turn their head and the sun catches it a certain way. And you'll see another hummingbird with another Anna's hummingbird with that distinctive red under at the top of the chest. Now, the next story is about black skimmers, and it's related to the beak story because they have kind of a strange beak. It's not just that it's orange and black, which is kind of interesting in itself, but you kind of see it and you kind of go, what's that little knob or whatever is that, what's that on the bottom of the beak near the face? And when you see them up close, there it is again. It looks kind of like a hinge. And when you look at the two parts of the beak, the upper part is shorter, and the bottom part is longer. You think, gosh, you think that would make it hard to eat. But it turns out that they skim the water, and that long lower beak goes into the water and scoops up their lunch. So here's another close-up where you can see how that longer beak goes into the water, scoops up their food, and then they eat it. We saw actually two of these at Shoreline Lake along Mountain View Slough, flying back and forth along the edge of the water. And Tony and I tracked them for quite some time. It was very interesting. We thought it was just one bird, and then we finally saw both of them together. It was like, oh, there are two birds here. So that's the black skimmer. They are still out there. If you go out to Shoreline or out along Adobe Creek, you can still see them. But you have to be really lucky to see them fishing, I have to say. So pied-billed grebes are another very common bird in our area. The males and the females look alike, and they have that, the adults have that black stripe on their beaks, which is why they're called pied-billed grebes. This is a male, and in the spring, we saw this one at Baranda Lake in Foothills Park. And well, we heard it first because he was going, whoo, whoo, and was evidently marking his territory and telling other male birds, stay out, this is my pond, or this is my part of the pond, don't come here. And of course, the inevitable result of marking territory and beginning courting behavior is you have baby grebes. So this was July of 2020. This bird is sitting on the nest in the middle of Emily Renzel Marsh. You can see the broken egg and you can see the fluffy baby there. It seems to me from watching that both males and females take care of the birds. So, and they look alike. So I can't tell you whether this is mom or dad, but somebody is tending to these eggs. And then they, this is what the little ones look like. So they really are adorable with those little stripes. And mom or dad dives down, because they are divers, dive down, get something out of the water and bring it to the babies, or they pop up and the babies get their little feet going and swim over and have their snack. And this summer, I was back at Renzel Marsh and found this nest, which was along the side of a water area for these cute little stripy babies. It was interesting because the one in the front was farther away most of the time and seemed to get more food. And the one in the way back never left the nest while I was watching. And so different birds have different personalities, even within the same family. And here is, I took kind of like 3 action shots of parent bird feeding baby bird some kind of an interesting crustacean with wiggly legs. And you realize, you've probably heard the expression, scarce as hen's teeth. Well, birds don't have teeth. At least these birds don't have teeth. And so they have that big wiggly thing and they swallow it whole. So it is pretty amazing to see how they get it down their throat. And then they must, something about their innards lets them digest, deal with the bones and the shells. So it's very interesting. And a friend of mine thought this bird, the view on the bottom showed mom or dad with a smile on her face. Well, that might be just a little bit too much projection for me, but it's a nice sequence to see the process. And then I just took this one last week. So the baby is starting, the colors are starting to change. And it's almost as big as the adult. The only difference is the coloring. And this one was begging to be fed, but mom or dad wasn't having any of it. It was like, no, I'm not feeding you. You got to go get it yourself. But so you can kind of see the progression from the little babies to the bigger babies to the almost adult size. And then just babies are so cute. So these are the other babies. So this is an American coot feeding a little greenery to this baby. And mallards are really just adorable. So these are 2 little mallard ducklings. And then this is a picture with mama. And there are actually, count the heads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 6 of them are going with mama, and she's kind of leading them over to a more protected area. But when there are a lot of babies, seems like there's always one that goes off on its own. So you have this one on the left who hasn't gotten the message yet, or is doing his or her own thing. And So I thought that particularly tells a story. And then I'd love to get a picture of the entire great horned owl, both the parent and the baby, but this was the best I could do. They are cute. They look big. They're very fluffy. And you can see mom or dad there in the background looking out, but they just are really unusual looking. Well, Canada geese are probably almost my favorite bird to take photographs of because they're big, they're not shy, they're noisy and active. This is a whole phalanx of them swimming across a shoreline lake with that one little, in the lower right, you see that one little surf scooter going the other way. And there's a little, I think, a grebe out there. They like to be in groups. They honk at each other. They honk when they fly. And they're protective of their babies. You can see this as mom and dad. Again, it's hard to tell. I've heard that the males are bigger, but it's pretty hard to tell the difference between the males and the females, but they both take care of the babies. So these are pretty young ones. And mom and dad aren't too happy about people watching them, but they're at shoreline, so there are going to be a lot of people there. Here's a close-up of the baby. So they're just really so cute, all yellow and fluffy. And here's a family, mom and dad with 5 babies. And this spring I did see a mom and dad with 13 babies. So I don't know what determines why some families are bigger than others. But I really like this shot of them all going in a line with one in front, one parent in front and one in back. And here's a close-up of one of those babies. So you can see a little yes yellow. They're starting to get a little different coloring. And the other thing I realized when I look at photos of these baby Canada geese is that they have huge feet. It's kind of like having a Labrador puppy, and you go, oh, this puppy's so small. And then you look at the feet and you go, oh, it's going to be a big dog. So the babies have big feet. This one wasn't actually honking at me, but it was coming right at me. So I thought this was a great shot. Yeah, they stick their tongues out and honk. And I just thought this was, so this is probably part of the mating or the courting ritual. And but I've noticed that people vary into which they think is the male and which they think is the female. So I think it just depends on how you look at things, which one is which. The one in front didn't seem to be paying too much attention, but the one behind was doing a lot of work. And then this was just so unusual. So Canada geese eat grass or eat things in the grass, and they sometimes stick their heads in the water when they're on the water, but they're not divers particularly. But we were watching 2 Canada geese and they were flapping their wings. And then one of them turned upside down, dove in the water, turned upside down, and their feet are flapping in the air. So somebody else said they'd seen this. So whether it's a grooming technique or it was as somebody said, darling, I'd do anything for you, whether it's part of a mating ritual or what, but it was just so unusual to see those feet in the air. And then I think they're just beautiful birds, those long, graceful necks. This is doing grooming, but I love the lines, and they're just, I just think they're really interesting birds. And they're beautiful when they fly. And you can see how, well, I think all birds are beautiful when they fly, but they're very graceful and so nice with the reflection. So the next story is about Forster's terns. Terns are very common. The Forster's tern is the common one in our area. This is in non-breeding plumage because I took this one last fall. And we were at the Sunnyvale water treatment plant area, and we saw like 12 terns diving. And so of course we walked over to where that was. And they dive from the sky. And so you can see they go quite a ways under when they dive. I would love to get one streaking down, but by the time you realize it's going to streak and push the button, it's already gone by. So it's hard to get a photo of it. But here you can see, as I said, how deep it gets. Here the bird is swimming under the water. Here it's coming out. It's got some little tiny fish in its mouth. It's a big splash when it goes in. And then it flies off, finishes its snack, and then comes back around again. So we watched them, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes as they circled around, dove in, got something, came back out. It was really exciting to see. And then this summer, we saw terns at Shoreline Lake, and these are in their breeding plumage. So that dark head is very distinctive. And then I made this composite. Before they dive, they flutter, stay in place and flutter. And so I took a series of pictures and put them together because I think they're so graceful. They're just beautiful, the wing position, and they just hang there in the air until they spot something, and then down they go. And here it is, it's dove in the water, grabbed something, then it's flying off and flying away with its prize. The Western bluebirds are actually very common, particularly in the spring. And they're one of the birds where the males and females look different, have different coloring. This is a male. And as I said, you see them often in the springtime, the couples. You look at that beak, it's a little skinny beak. So you figure, well, they're not cracking seeds. And in fact, this one got this caterpillar, which it thumped around a bit, probably to kill it. And then it flew off to wherever it was going to eat it. So they eat caterpillars. And here's one with some kind of a little flying insect in its mouth. And here's the male and the female. So it looks like they weren't talking today when this picture was taken. The male on the left, much more blue with that beautiful rust chest and lighter on the stomach. And then the female has a little blue, but not as much. And yeah, they're just really lovely birds. And other than maybe a Bullock's Oriole or a Western Tanager, they're about the brightest, or maybe an indigo bunting, which I have not seen in our area. They come through. These are among the most colorful birds that we have. So it's fun, really fun to see them. Then the story about the Clarks and Western Grebes. So for a long time, I just thought there was one kind of large grebe with this long neck, the red eye, the long neck. They're pretty large sized birds. They dive. I thought they were just all Western Grebes, but I have since learned that Clark's Grebes are very similar, except the eye, for a Western Grebe, the eye is in the black feathers. And in a Clark's Grebe, the white feathers come up and include the eye. So you go, oh, well, that's pretty obvious. I should be able to tell. Well, it turns out they interbreed. So they trick you. So here are two, it looks like the eyes are in the black, but there's a lot of white there. This was taken down at Calero Reservoir, where a lot of the grebes hang out in the spring, in March and April. And they do interesting courting behavior. If you remember the old Disney documentaries, Grebes were among those that they featured because they do this mimicking where they do parallel behavior. They talk to each other. They again are relating to each other. These both look like Western Grebes, right? And then they practice getting up on their legs. So this one doesn't have a partner. He's clearly just practicing. And then there they are. They move their feet really fast so that they're just standing up in the water, moving pretty quickly. And you kind of go, well, now, are these Western Grebes or Clark's Grebes? Well, maybe the one on the right is a Clark Grebe, but there's black and white around that eye. So clearly they don't have a problem interbreeding. I suppose eventually they'll just be one breed between the two of them. But they move their feet really fast so that they can stay up on the water. And they stay up for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 seconds. So long enough to get quite a stream of pictures. So it was really exciting to see them. So that's Clark's and Western Grebes. They're bigger Grebes. Then acorn woodpeckers are very common in our area in the oak trees. And they're very photogenic because they have that wonderful red head and white on their face. And you can often see them up in the branches. This was in spring. You can see there are no leaves on the branch. But beautiful, beautiful coloring and kind of a clown-like face, but very distinctive. They also have a distinctive call. And of course, what they're interested in is acorns. And here is one putting acorns into holes in a tree. Of course, they're woodpeckers. They peck these holes. And then they put acorns in them. And you might think, well, gosh, this is a lot of acorns. Did this woodpecker do all of them? No, woodpeckers have a tree called a granary, Granary, where a group of acorn woodpeckers will fill the tree and then take turns guarding it. So it actually belongs to a group of acorn woodpeckers. But I felt really fortunate to see this one putting something in a hole. And then I have the one that got away story. So this is, if you've ever tried to do bird photography, you know that sometimes you get the bird and sometimes you get a branch or something like that. So this is a photo by my friend Carl Gohl, and he sent me the picture and it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a picture of a bald eagle right now. I'd love to go get that one. So he'd taken it at Grant Lake, which is at Grant Ranch County Park, which is about halfway up the road to Mount Hamilton. And I got there one morning and I could see with binoculars across the lake that there was a bald eagle in a tree. So I trundle over there and I'm just getting, the basic rule, one of the rules of bird photography and other photography is that you take the picture you can get and then you see if you can get a better picture. So it's a little sequence because you never know when something might change. If you wait until it's perfect, you may never get a picture. So I'd gotten close enough that I thought, well, okay, I can get a decent picture here and then I'll see if I can get a better one. And I hold my camera up to my face and I'm just pushing down the button. And this is what I see. So I don't think I scared the eagles away. I don't think people scare eagles very much, but it had been there long enough and took off. So it was like, well, win some, lose some. And that would be the end of the story. But as it turns out, it's not quite the end because this summer in June, I went on a photography workshop in the San Juan Islands and in Puget Sound. And we went to an area that had great blue herons and bald eagles. So I got lots of bald eagle pictures. That's the Olympic Mountains in the background. So this is not local. You have to go up to Washington, but it kind of finishes off my story. This is the area we were where Big Beef Creek comes into Hood Canal, which is tidal because it's eventually connected to the ocean. And as the tide goes out, these oyster beds become visible, and it captures the fish that are in the water so that they can't fly, they can't swim out into the deep water and be safer. So it attracts great blue herons and eagles. So here's a picture where the tide has gone quite a ways out. You can see there's an eagle there, some more mountains. And you can see they're very shallow areas of water and the fish get caught. So you can see that on the left you have a young eagle carrying a fish, and the great blue heron is not happy about it. I don't know if the eagle actually stole a fish from another bird or whether herons just aren't happy with the eagles because they do steal the fish. So it kind of tells a little story. They're having a communication there. Not a happy bird. When it takes bald eagles 5 or 6 years to get that white head, so the immature ones are in process of becoming mature bald eagles, and they fight a lot. They fight even if they don't have a fish. And they have those wonderful talons, just amazing talons. And this is not a composite. I took it just as it was. They're clearly, the two birds are relating to each other. So they were having a little tiff there. Here's a mature bald eagle with a fish. I think they catch them with their feet, but obviously they eat them with their mouths. That bald eagles really are magnificent. They are gorgeous animals, no question about that, gorgeous birds. And then there were lined up maybe 40 great blue herons. So in our area, you get really excited if you see one great blue heron because they're dramatic, they're big. And to see 40 of them lined up, some of them fishing, and they're beautiful when they are landing. And this one had just come in, and I thought it looked like a model on a runway. So fancy schmancy. Here's another one coming in, feet down, ready for a landing. They're really so graceful. And they were catching the fish. These are midshipman fish. And they stab them. It's not like the eagles, which of course grab them and, you know, the talons, you know, pierce. They stab them with their long beaks. And then they dip them in the water. We thought maybe they were making it slicker because, again, birds don't have teeth. So they swallow this fairly good sized fish. They swallow it head first, swallow it whole. And then you can see after they've swallowed it, you can see suddenly the neck is very thick. So you kind of realize how flexible, I mean, it's true with pelicans too, that they capture things in their beak and then they swallow, and you know the throat must be really large. So I thought it was really funny to see kind of the next step after they swallow it. So those are my 12 stories. There are other stories, but it's enough for today. So sit back and take a deep breath. I'm going to show you a little 5-minute slideshow with music. And imagine you're out on a trail near the water or among the trees, and you feel the fresh air and the soft breeze, and you can just relax and enjoy. And I will stop the share. So I can see the questions now. So several people asked about my camera equipment. So as I've gotten older, I need a smaller camera. I just can't carry around a big camera. So I use a Sony RX10. It's version 4 IV. And it's an all-in-one. So it shoots from 24 to 600 millimeters on a crop sensor. I chose it because the sensor's the same size as my Nikon. I've never had a full frame camera. I've always had a crop sensor, but it was the same size. So I knew I wouldn't be losing any quality. And but it's an all-in-one, so it's really useful whether you're taking landscape or whether you're doing close-up. And I use a single spot focus, and there's actually another focus I can use that will find if birds flying. I can use that, and it helps to find the bird and then to keep the bird in focus. So it's not I think the whole setup is a little over $2,000, but it's a lot cheaper than a $13,000 600 millimeter lens, which would be, the best that you could buy. So,
Judy, let me jump in really quick.
sure.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.